And I'll tell you why. I'm in the cattle business.
This week on American Interests.
In America, the grassroots are going to eventually have something to say about what goes on. And I can tell you now, the grassroots are fed up with the Japanese.
Texas takeover artist T. Boone Pickens. He talks about the jittery stock market and his single-minded crusade to pry open corporate Japan. America versus Japan, Inc. Is it a fair fight? From 6 months after the fact, people still ask Boone Pickens, why did you do it? Last April, Pickens showed up in Tokyo to claim his 20% share of Koito Manufacturing, an $800 million auto parts maker that supplies components to Toyota and Nissan. In return for the $1 billion he paid to another Japanese investor, Pickens wanted 3 seats on Koito's board and a say in running the company. To its new #1 shareholder, Koito said, no way. Pickens ran smack into the wall of corporate Japan. With its system of interlocking ownerships and secretive behavior, today's Japanese corporations are a lot like corporate America a century ago, before antitrust laws went on the books. According to Pickens, Japan Inc. doesn't want a foreigner observing its system from the inside. In Pickens, Koito sees a dangerous adversary. In the early 1980s, he launched bold raids on big American oil companies. Gulf, Phillips Petroleum, and City Service all fought Pickens off, but they handed him a total of $500 million in the process. Koito is worried that Pickens will try to take control of the company, or at least demand a green mail buyout of his shares. As the U.S. pursues trade negotiations with Japan, Pickens expects that the Bush administration will cite his Koito experience as proof that the Japanese must open up to the outside world. He insists that his Japanese venture is above board, that making Koito more profitable is his only motive, and that he'll continue to fight for a place on the board. Pickens recently decided not to enter the Texas governor's race after much speculation that he would. Whatever his real intentions, for an avowed populist like Pickens, it's hard to imagine a more delicious target than Japan Inc.
Welcome to American Interests. I'm Morton Kondracki. Mr. Pickens, before we get into the issue of Japan and U.S. Trade relations, let's talk about the stock market gyrations of the past week. Does this suggest to you any basic weakness in the American economy?
I don't see it as a weakness in the American economy. I think it's a weakness in some of the so-called deal stocks that are trading in the market. And this one, you know, can be identified back to UAL and the financing that did break down prior to the 200-point drop.
Well, besides the United Airlines, that's sort of typical, it's said to be typical anyway, of the whole junk bond, leveraged buyout, corporate debt situation, that there's real nervousness about all of that as though it's some sort of bubble. Is there anything dangerous afoot?
I don't think so. I mean, I see the economy as still a strong economy. I'm not going to say that we're going to have it moving along at the pace it has here in the past, and it can be slowdowns and still be a good economy. But when I see, you know, 5.2% unemployment in America, I have the feeling that most everybody that's qualified has an opportunity to have a job. And so that, I think, is very important. And I see different things today in October 1989 than I see back in 1987.
Okay. Well, one last theory about all this, and that is that that when the Congress decided that it wouldn't pass President Bush's capital gains tax reduction, that caused the market to sink.
I don't think so, but that's not over with yet. I mean, we still maybe have a chance of reduction in capital gains tax.
You're for it?
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm for any reduction in taxes.
Okay. Why did you decide originally to go in and challenge Japan Incorporated by buying 20% of the Koito company?
The first reason, and at that time the only reason, was to make a profit. I expect to make a capital gains from the ownership of Koito Manufacturing. And remember, this all started back in November 1988. And the owner of 20% of that stock, Katiro Watanabe, came through a mutual friend. And anybody that will come all the way from Tokyo to Texas to see me and talk business, well, I'll be glad to listen to them. But we bought that interest and asked to go on the board of Koito. And we said, we're not hostile. We're not trying to green mail you. We're long-term holders. We're not trying to sell the stock back to you. We now are your largest stockholder, and we'd like to have representation.
And they denied it.
Yes, I mean, they just summarily dismissed us.
All right, now you are in a hostile situation with them.
No, I'm not in a hostile situation.
Well, they're in a hostile situation with you,
okay,
aren't
maybe
they?
so, but I still have, I've said the same thing from the outset, that we want to be a constructive, large stockholder in a Japanese company, and we have selected Koito. We saw it as a unique opportunity to get into corporate Japan, and we took.
Now, why did you want to get into corporate Japan? That's the question. What was it that led you into that? Why not go to Europe? Why not stay here?
Well, for one thing, a 20% block was available to us. There wasn't anybody that came from Europe with 20% of anything to sell us. And so here we had what we believed to be good terms that we could buy the stock.
Okay.
And so we bought it. And with the idea, I don't think today that we have the opportunity to make anything like I thought we did at one time out of it. But also, you know, you've seen where Toyota has announced that they're going to double their U.S. production. That means a lot of lights for Koito to sell, because Koito makes all the lights for the Toyota cars. So there are much greater opportunities for Koito to expand their business, which is exactly what we said. When we looked at it, we said, we've got worldwide connections, and we would be a good member of the board. We'll work in behalf of shareholders to expand markets. And I mean, we said all of the things that a good director would say, and we meant every word of it.
Okay. One theory about why you did it is the green mail theory. Now, let me just ask you this. If the price of the stock is now $31 a share, I don't know, and you bought it for somewhere less than that, if they offered you $50 a share to get lost, would you take it?
No. No, we've said from the outset that we're not interested in green mail. That's it.
There's another theory about this, that what you were really up to was some sort of a publicity stunt, that you, for political reasons, you were thinking about running for governor, and this really sort of elevated your image. Any truth to that?
Well, Mort, let me tell you, for what we invested in Koito, I could have bought an awful lot of TV time and bumper stickers and still come out with a lot of money left over. So it was never envisioned that we would go into the Japanese deal with the thought that this was going to be helpful to us in a political campaign. But I will say this, that it was never discussed, but it was quickly understood that what we were doing was a plus, because the grassroots in this country, and especially in Texas, are very, very suspicious of the Japanese. And when I would go around over the state making speeches, I'd get more questions about the Japanese deal I was involved in than running for governor.
What does it say in general about the Japanese economy that they won't let you in? What are the larger lessons about the way the Japanese economy is organized that they won't let you on the board of Koito?
Well, when you look at the Japanese trading practices, for one thing, and when you see the deficit $55 billion in their favor with the United States, and then talk to people that have tried to do business in Japan, and that's the second largest economy in the world, and they can't get in. I mean, it's almost impossible. Talk to the people at Federal Express and see what they have to do to get a package into Japan. It has to be unwrapped, looked at, and a picture drawn of what's in the box. But so they're closed, Mort, over there. They will not let you in, is what it amounts to. They don't want me in to see and to talk about what goes on in corporate Japan.
But do you think this is racist on their part?
To some degree, yes, I do. But they don't want me talking about the things that I talk about. And those is the middle class in Japan, the working class, does not have a standard of living like you have in America. I don't care what the media tells you. It's not, that point is not true. Second, the biggest myth that was ever sold in America was that the Japanese are the world's greatest managers. The world's greatest managers are in America. We have the best managers. We don't win every time, but we win most of the time. And given a level playing field with the Japanese, we can win more than they can win.
If their system is bad for their people, why shouldn't they be responsible for changing it? And won't they suffer if their citizens live in small houses, if their corporate executives are living a cushy life? What difference does it make to us?
The
Will they
difference that
lose in the long run?
the difference it makes is that they get to come into a system in America, and we don't get the same rights over there. So they're sitting there with a closed door. We can't get in. We can't market in Japan. It's the second largest economy in the world. We can't break into their financial markets. But they have a free reign in the United States. And I can tell you, I'm in very good touch with the grassroots. And the people in this country don't like it. And what is going to happen is that you're going to have pressure put on Congress from the grassroots up. And the administration sitting some distance away from the grassroots. They don't realize how much pressure is coming on Congress to do something about this. But all I'm saying is give us a level playing field. If they're going to come in and play by our rules, then by golly, we should be able to play by those same rules.
So what do you want to do? You want to cut them off from access to American investment?
Well, this is a tough one for me because, you know, I've made hundreds of speeches about being a free trader in a global economy. And this is the way that we raise the standard of living for more people around the world than with foreign aid. I never was for foreign aid. I don't think you buy friends. But I do think by trading, having trading partners, that you can help more people in that way. So this question is a tough one for me because now we get right to legislation real quick. But you're going to have to give American trade representatives something to trade with. They can't go up and move up to the table with no tools.
Okay, now there's supposed to be structural impediments talks going on between us and the Japanese over just the kind of thing you're mentioning.
Well, and from that, if we do not get the results that we need in this country to trade with the Japanese, and I don't think you'll get them, but I'm hopeful that we will, because our trade representatives have nothing to trade with. They move up to the table empty-handed. Well, I mean, those kind of negotiations, you can see it across the street. I mean, right here in America, trading with Americans, you go to negotiate with nothing to negotiate with, and they'll pick your pocket.
You want a hammer and a dagger. What is that? What constitutes that, though? What are the weapons that you want to equip American trade negotiators to use?
Well, for instance, let's just look at what happened. Here I'm bucking the system in corporate Japan. I can't get on the board. What does Sony do? They walk in, make an offer for Columbia Pictures. The deal's done like that. $3.6 billion. Zap. Nobody even says anything. I mean, there's something wrong when you can't get board representation and Sony can buy a $3.6 billion company in a New York minute. So what I want to see our trade representatives, I want them there to say, no, we're not going to do some of these things in America anymore. We're closing down until we can get you to work and open up your country so they can move in. It'll be better for Japan. And let me tell you, right now we're hearing from the small stockholders in Kuwait. We've heard from a number of them. And they're saying, we're for you 100%.
Akio Morita, the head of Sony, has written a book called The Japan That Can Say No, and it contains arguments that are probably familiar to you, that basically the trade problem is America's problem, that we're not producing products as good as Japanese are, that we think in short term, and that what our companies increasingly do is just move money around instead of manufacturing first-rate products. What do you say about that?
Well, why is it, if we're so stupid in America, why is it that the Japanese want to buy everything over here? It's because they want to be here instead of there, and that's why they're bringing all their money into the United States and buying all the things. But what Mr. Morita says is true. It's our own fault, because we just opened the door and said, come on in. Buy anything you want, see whatever you like, and compete with us however you want to. But let me tell you, in America, our workers are the best workers in the world if they're properly led. If you have good corporate leadership, you can beat the Japanese most of the time.
And are they properly led?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no.
In most cases?
I'd say in most cases, no. I think that we have fewer good corporate leaders than I'd like to see. But we've got some good ones, and they're getting better all the time because there's pressure being put on our leadership in corporate America today to do a better job. And the evidence for that we're more efficient today than we were 5 years ago. I'm not talking about companies that have always been under attack. I mean, go in and look what's happened at Exxon. I mean, they've reduced forces and they've become more competitive than they were. And they've never been under any pressure of takeover or anything like that. But now the results, right quick. 87, we had the best corporate performance in the Fortune 500 we ever had. And we topped it in 88. That is not an accident. That's because corporate America has become more productive, more efficient, and more competitive.
Okay, but why do Americans buy? They have a choice between American cars and Japanese cars, right? They buy Japanese cars because the service is better, because they perform better, because they think they're better cars. Now, why is that?
Well, I would say that the automobile industry in America is not competing to the level that you and I would like to see happen. So you're back to leadership again. But when you get a better car, Americans would rather buy an American car than they would a Japanese car. And I don't want to do this. I mean, when I hear, one of the CEOs of corporate America's automobile companies say, buy America. I say, buy America if America makes the best product. And we can make the best product if we're pushed to do it.
Do you think that we'll make the best product that we possibly can if we lock Japan out of our markets?
I'm not ready to go that far, to lock Japan out of the markets. I'm saying that you have got to get something for our trade representatives to trade with. If that requires barriers coming up, then so be it. Put the barriers up and then bring them down. As the Japanese bring their barriers down, we'll bring our barriers down. But Senator Hollings put it very well. He said, we'll erect barriers, and he said, we'll bring our barriers down. But he said, we're going to get a level playing field, or we're not going to play in this game.
Okay, another of the Morita criticisms is that our corporate managers think in terms of 10 minutes, not years, not long-term investment, but quarterly at the outside, because their stockholders and pension funds and so on demand it. Now, is there anything to that?
Now, go back to who is it that puts the pressure on the pension fund managers to put the pressure back on the management?
Namely?
Okay, the pension funds have corporate America's funds. And the pressure is put on the pension fund manager because the CEOs in corporate America says, you get me performance or I'll change pension fund managers. So they cause their own problem.
But you agree with the criticism?
I'll say that there is some of that there. I'll agree with that.
Okay.
That there are too many short-term thinkers, and those are the same guys that'll get up from the Business Roundtable and make the lengthy speech about the short-term players, and I'm a long-term player. And I'll tell you what, those are the guys that are short-term thinkers.
Okay. Do you see any problem? Some people have alleged that the Japanese are buying up all the lobbying firms in Washington, and that the next step is going to be that they're going to start involving themselves in American politics to try to help defeat quote-unquote Japan basher congressmen. Do you have any fear that that's coming?
Sure. I don't think there's any doubt about the Japanese pouring money into Washington and hiring some of the best firms to lobby in their behalf. I have estimated that what they're putting in there is about $1 million a day. But the Japanese have made one big mistake about America. They have believed the way you handle it is over the top, just like they do in Japan. And in America, the grassroots are going to eventually have something to say about what goes on. And I can tell you now, the grassroots are fed up with the Japanese. And I feel that you have to have the #2 economy in the world as a trading partner. And I'm not ready to say, close them out, bash them, or do anything to them other than let's level the playing field.
Is there any evidence that the Japanese have ever contributed money to a campaign in order to defeat one of their enemies?
I can't give you specific information.
But you think that's down the line?
I think that has been done, and I think that if good investigation will find some of that, but I think more and more of it will happen as we go along.
And you think it's already going on?
Yes, I do.
And when it comes out, the reaction will be?
Well, I think you're already having a backlash in this country. And I don't think the Japanese are reading it because they aren't in at the grassroots and they don't know what's being said. Either that or they're just got a tough enough hide that they're going to go ahead and accept it and plow ahead.
No, they say it's racism on our part.
Yeah, well, there's not any racism in the deal. It's just that people are concerned about the Japanese buying up everything, so to speak. And they don't have enough money to buy America, but they can sure take a big bite if we don't watch out.
What do you think they're going to buy?
Well, they're buying now. I mean, you know what they're buying. I mean, look at Sony buying Columbia Pictures, and they made some other acquisition prior to that was $2 billion. I can't remember who it was, but they've taken, and this thing is...
CBS Records, I think.
That's right. That's what it was, CBS Records. But
okay, what is wrong if they've got the money, they've got all this money because we bought all these VCRs and all these cars that were so much better than the stuff we make, right? So now they've got dollars and they got to do something with it. So they buy CBS Records and they buy Columbia Pictures and they buy big buildings and they buy stores.
And they buy ranches and they buy real estate.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
Well, see, I've been a free trader, and I've said the same thing. If they provide competition for us, we build a better car today because of the Japanese and the Germans. Not just the Japanese. I mean, we've got others in here that are trading, too. But it's only fair that they open up our products into their markets. And they're not going to be able to sit there for too much longer and keep the door closed and keep the deficit of $55 billion between America and Japan. They're not going to be able to do it because the people in America are not going to allow it to be done. I don't care whether they have the money to come in here and buy or not. I mean, it's not going to continue.
In Congress and in corporate boardrooms, people are pounding tables and blaming the Japanese for everything. The governors of states, however, are all chasing off to Japan saying, please invest in my state and employ my workers. Now, which is representing the grassroots?
Well, the first thing is the governors better be careful on what they're doing, because they're going to find that there are a lot of people in their state that are not that anxious to have the Japanese in. Now, if I was, and I almost ran for governor, and I can tell you that my involvement with the Japanese and trying to get them to become fair trading partners would have been an asset to me in a governor's race in Texas. I can tell you that. I would not have been running to Tokyo trying to get them to build an automobile plant in Texas. I can tell you that.
You know, there is a case that's made that the percentage of the trade deficit that is the result of Japanese trade barriers, formal and informal, is something like 20% at the outside, and the rest of it is the result of our inability to sell, having the products that they want to buy, unwillingness to really try to sell in their markets, and just not having products that are as good. Do you believe that figure or not?
No, I don't believe it. And I'll tell you why. I'm in the cattle business. And if you're in the cattle business, you sell cattle, and that becomes beefsteak on the table for somebody. Have you seen how long it's been for us to get beef into the Japanese market and what we have to pay to get it in there? And we're finally breaking down and getting it into the Japanese market after 20 years. And so, they said, but the Japanese don't like beef. We said, well, let's see if they like it. Let's give them a chance to get to like it.
So what would you guess
I think we have a $55 billion trade deficit with the Japanese.
Right.
And if they think that is the answer to the question, my response to that is open yourself up and let's see what the trade deficit is. If we have such shoddy products, then they shouldn't be bought. And if we have things you don't want, they'll die on the shelf and we'll become losers for it. Let's see if the Japanese want American products.
Do you think is it actually the government that refuses to let the products in, or is it the culture? You know, the stores don't want to carry it, and so on and so forth.
See, I believe that the people in Japan, I'm talking about the worker in Japan, likes what I do because I've heard from them. And if you look at the editorials that have been written in the major Japanese newspapers, you'd have to believe that they have some doubts as to their system. So when you say, who is it? I say it's the cartel. I say it's a club. And that consists of part government and part elitist in Japan. They're the ones that don't want you in because they have the markets captured.
Do you think that your hammering away on Koito makes you popular in Japan enough that they're actually going to have to give on the board? There is a political kind of turmoil going on in Japan. Is it a populist kind of turmoil that's going to result in your being able to get on the board and they're opening up, or are they going to close down?
Well, that's the only place I know is the populist angle, whether it's in corporate America or corporate Japan or wherever I've been, that I'm usually connected with the populist side of an issue. I know I'm on the right side of the issue. I mean, there's not anybody going to argue with me. And the editorials that I've read, that they say that Pickens is entitled to seats on the board. Now, whether I get them or not is the question.
Are there any politicians who are on your side?
Well, probably. But, I mean, now if you ask me to name them, I can't name them. I recall one that met me in Washington, and I can't tell you what his name is because those names are real hard for me. But he was for us, and thought we should continue to do what we were doing.
Okay. Let me ask you a prediction question to finish this out. 5 years from now, would you expect that the trade deficit will be down, or do you expect that we will be in a trade war with the Japanese?
I don't know. You may identify what we're in right now as a trade war. I mean, they're very committed to gaining our markets. And I think that Congress is ready to do something. And so in 5 years from now, I'd say that the trade deficit is down and that we will be forever in a trade war with the Japanese because they're very competitive and we are too. And I think that once Congress levels the field and says we're going to play on the same basis. Now look what's happened with the Canadians. And I used to live in Canada back in the 60s in the oil business. I lived in Calgary. And I know a bit about Canada. I know how the Canadians think. I traded with them. We were very successful in business in Canada. And I thought at times they were unfair, but when it all worked out, it worked out quite well. Today the barriers are coming down with Canada, which is a natural place for them to come down, frankly, because the Canadians and the Americans are a lot alike, think a lot alike. And I can see the same thing happening in Japan.
Thanks very much. For American Interests, I'm Morton Kondracki.
This program was produced by the Blackwell Corporation, which is solely responsible for its content.